Welcome back to Conscious Not Crazy. I'm Kori, your host, and as always, I'm grateful to be here. It's been a little crazy lately, so I'm working on a website. So I will definitely be letting you guys know as soon as that's up and running. We've just been working on editing it, and so soon it'll be ready to go, and then I'll be able to keep you guys up to date and informed on new things happening in the Conscious Not Crazy community. So I'm super excited about that. But thanks so much for tuning in. And again, if you are liking this content, if you are finding benefit in what I'm sharing, and my goal is to show up authentically, share from my own personal experiences, and share my own failures and challenges. But if you are finding or if you are seeing the benefit of this information or finding this information useful, I just ask that you like and share the podcast on whatever platform you are listening to it on, and follow, like, share, and follow, and share with any teachers, educators, other parents that you think might benefit, babysitters, anyone that works with children. And even if they don't, or even if their children are grown, they might find something beneficial about the information that I share. Because really, the information I share, I talk about in the context of parenting, and the process of becoming a parent and parenting has really changed my life, and I've grown a lot personally, and I'm forever grateful for that. But these are schools. Well, it's kind of like going to school when you become a parent, but tools and skills is what I was trying to say. Tools and skills that can be useful in any relationship, any marriage, any friendship, in a work relationship. So, relationship with a coworker, a boss, really any environment. If you're an educator working with kids, these tools can be equally beneficial in all types of environments. So it's not limited to just parenting, because really I'm just talking about how the brain works, the why behind behavior, and you'll hear me say that over and over. But yeah, so if you're liking what you're hearing and you feel like you're benefiting from it, please like, follow, and share Conscious Not Crazy by Kori. I can be found on all the platforms. But I'm talking to you today, and there's been something on my mind. And what it is about not taking things personal. So often I see parents doing this. I was guilty of taking things personal years ago. Haven't perfected it yet, but I've come a long way. And it's definitely freeing. It's definitely freeing when we can free ourselves from taking other people's behavior personal or thinking it's about us. I'm going to read you the actual definition of taking things personal. So, if you take someone's remarks personally, you are upset because you think they are criticizing you in particular. So you're taking it personal because you think they're being critical towards you, or it's a reflection of you in some way. Maybe it's how your child's dressed. You think that's a reflection of you. That's not so much taking it personal, but you're worried about what people think about how your child's dressed because their clothes don't match. And now that makes you a bad mom, because they don't look how you want them to look. But I encourage you to let that go, because that is not a reflection of you as a bad mom or dad or grandparent. That is a reflection of you allowing your child to feel confident and try on some stuff. They're trying to figure it out. Who cares if they're clean and they have clothes on? Who cares? Who cares? Let go. It is not, in the big scheme of things in life, that is not important. Now, if my kids have a special event, a wedding or church or something, that's different. But on an everyday basis, if they're warm, if they're dressed appropriately for the climate, for the most part, let it go. We need to stop trying to control those things. But really, the not taking things personal. I talk a lot about modeling behavior for our kids. And in order to model how to not take things personal, you have to look at yourself first. And you have to stop taking what your child does personal. Because you'll hear parents often say, well, they're just pushing my buttons. Well, your child is not intentionally doing shit to drive you nuts, right? They want your attention. They want something from you. There is a why behind that behavior, driving that behavior. It's not about you, so disconnect from it. Instead, be conscious, be in the present moment, and see and recognize the behavior for what it is. And then you can address it and coach them through it in a more appropriate manner. So it's not pushing your buttons and driving you crazy, but in no way is it appropriate for us to blame a child for our frustration. My children are not responsible for my anger. My children are not responsible for my happiness. My children are not responsible for my sadness. I am in charge of my emotions and how I feel. And most of all of what happens with how I feel, if I don't like how I'm feeling, and I've said this before, if I don't like how I'm feeling, I need to stop and think about what I'm thinking, because I can change my thought. I can take action, and I have power to do that. So don't give your power away. Your kids aren't responsible for your anger, your frustration, your sadness, and just like they're not responsible for your happiness. I just had this conversation with my kids the other day. We were in the car, and I don't remember what started the conversation, but I made a comment to them. I said, because we're going through some changes in our family. Their dad and I are not living together, and we're going through a divorce. It's been going on a while now. And I said, you can always tell me what you want to do. If you want to go be with dad, you can go be with dad. If you want to be with me, you can be with me. Obviously, we have a schedule and a routine, and we always encourage them to follow it, but our kids are teenagers, so they are able to articulate and share feelings and needs and what they want to do. And I said, because it's not your job. I don't want you tiptoeing, trying to protect my feelings or thinking you're going to hurt my feelings if you want to go be with dad. I go, just tell me, because what you want matters, and my happiness is not your job. And I don't want my kids growing up being people pleasers or victims. I want them to feel confident. I want them to be able to be assertive. I want them to feel independent. And people pleasing people cannot be those things. So I want my kids to know that my happiness is my job, not theirs. So I was just sharing that because that came up the other day. But the whole not taking things personal, it truly is a freeing thing. And the reason I say that is because we no longer, if I'm in a room with someone, we've all been in different relationships. So let's say I'm in the room with the person I'm in the relationship with, whether it be a spouse or a boyfriend or whatever, and they're angry. And that person's angry, or it could be a parent, it could be a child, it could be anybody, it could be a coworker. I used to be the person who's like, why are you mad? What did I do? Because I would think their behavior was a reflection of something I did, even when I clearly knew I didn't do anything specific. But I just didn't like the feeling, and I wanted it to stop, but I saw it as my fault. And now when I'm in a room with someone that appears angry, or I notice a distraught behavior, I think, oh, I wonder what's going on. Something's going on over there right now. I detach from that, because their anger, their fear, whatever's going on for them is not a result of me. I'm not that powerful. I have the power to control my own emotions, but I'm not powerful enough to make someone else feel a certain way. Now, can we hurt someone's feelings? Absolutely. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about taking responsibility for someone else's bad mood, or taking responsibility for someone else's anger. That is not my job. I can be empathetic. I can notice it. I can say, how can I be helpful? Or, hey, what's going on? Maybe your child comes home from school, and somebody said they were stupid, or I don't like you, or I'm not going to be your friend anymore. Again, when my kids come home and share things, and that language looks a little different with a teenager, but when my kids come home and share things like that, I say, well, what do you think they're feeling? That's hurtful. How does that make you feel? Again, I don't tell them what they're feeling when they're my kids' age. And even with the younger child, you can ask. Sometimes with younger kids, we have to coach them along the way, and we have to give them options of things like, did that make you feel sad? Did that make you mad? Did that hurt your feelings? You can kind of coach them on some of the things to help them determine what they're feeling. With older kids, you could probably just ask, how did that make you feel? And then what can I do to be helpful? But letting them know and then recognizing, what do you think's going on with them? Why do you think they did that? Again, I'm not saying, what did you do to make them say that to you? Why do you think that person gets to own that? That is not my child's responsibility. That's why it doesn't serve your child. If a child's picking on your child or calling them names, and you call the mom and you're like, your child's doing this, and just going off on the other parent. It's like we're now judging the parent for their child's behavior and placing blame. And we're not coaching our kids. We're not modeling composure. We're not teaching them accountability. We're not teaching them how to cope and deal with hard things. My dad once told me when I was a kid, if it's hard or it's uncomfortable or you don't want to do it, you probably should. And he was right, because anything that's good for us, anything that the moments or anything that's hard is when we grow most. So those are moments of growth. When we push through the hard times, when we push through the challenges, that is when we learn the most and we grow the most. And I know that for a fact from the things I've experienced. I was recently at a workshop, or really an event, and it was all business people. And you may have seen this online or heard of this before, but we tend to put people in a box, right? We think they don't know. They don't know what we have going on. They would never understand. You think your situation's so much different than everyone else's. This is why I do the podcast, because it's not. We all have challenges. We all have struggles. Parenting's hard. You're not a bad parent if you've spanked your kid and yelled at your kid. You just have to know what my goal is to teach you a better way, so you don't feel the guilt of poor choices and poor composure and self-control. That's my goal, because I don't want you to feel like I felt. But I'm not judging you for the things you've done. We're all going to make mistakes. Every parent has. But they asked a question at this meeting. So what happens is when you play this game, you put tape on the floor. And there were like 3 boxes taped on the floor. And they said, everybody with blue eyes get in this box. Everybody with brown eyes get in this box. Everybody with green eyes get in this box. So what you do is you start to see commonalities among people. And they said, they went through some different questions. And then they got to a question that said, if you've ever made a mistake that you wish you could take back or that you regret, go to this box. And everyone's like, oh, well, everyone's going to be in that box because everybody makes mistakes, right? Well, I stood in the box all by myself. I just stood there and they were kind of looking at me. And the lady that was facilitating this activity turned around and looked at me, and I was like, I'll explain. And so she went through all the reasons that, mistakes are good. That's when we learn, kind of what I just said. The hard things, the challenges, the times that are most difficult are when we learn the most. And that's when we grow. That's when growth happens. If we were never challenged, growth would never happen. We wouldn't be pushed. So that is a very important thing to happen. And if you ask Michael Jordan or anyone, Walt Disney, anyone that's done anything, or been successful in life, they've had those difficult moments and they've persevered and pushed through. They just didn't quit. So anyway, so she got to me, she goes, well, explain to me why you stayed in this box. And what I said is, of course I've made mistakes. Absolutely. But I don't regret them, and I wouldn't take them back because I wouldn't have learned the lesson that came with it. So I want you to think about that, because those mistakes are going to be, our kids are going to make mistakes. We are going to make mistakes as parents, but have grace, move on, focus on how to do it better next time. Recognize it, move on. Model that for your kids. Don't get stuck. And don't take it personal. When your kid's mad, angry because you've instilled a consequence, or your kid is leaving their laundry on the floor repeatedly over, days and days, and you're like, I keep telling you to pick up your dirty clothes. Why aren't you picking up your dirty clothes? You're taking it personal. You're like, they're just doing it to make me mad. They hear me. That's this narrative that you're telling yourself. No, they're just not motivated. They're not motivated, and you don't have tight enough boundaries for them. There's too much wiggle room. So the next time they want you to drive them somewhere, or they want you to do something for them, maybe you say, hey, I noticed your clothes are on the floor. When I see those consistently picked up, I'll be available to do that for you. Or maybe you don't wait until that moment and you establish a new boundary. You notice, hey, I notice you are repeatedly leaving your clothes on the floor. Is that helpful? Because again, don't assume they're intentionally doing it to make your life miserable, because they're not. It's not about you. They're just not motivated. They don't care about the dirty clothes on the floor. I have one child that picks up everything and is immaculate. I have another one that could care less. Everybody's personality is different. So because it's not what we want or like, we can't assume that they're doing it to hurt us. It's not about us. People are egocentric, especially kids, especially young kids, and even some adults. People think about themselves, or they think other people, think about them way more than they do. And that is something to talk about with your kids. We don't do things for other people. We do it because it's the right thing to do. So if you don't like the clothes on the floor, create a new boundary, establish a new rule, and always know that those can change. You got to be flexible. You got to be able to adapt. You got to be able to pivot. If something's not working, pivot, change it. Kids get older, things change, challenges change. Like bedtime. When my kids were little, it was a shit show. We were running around in circles. They had a Jack and Jill bathroom. And I remember sweating and chasing him. I'm like, this isn't working. So we sat down, not in the evening when everyone's tired and frustrated and in the middle of the shit show, but we sat down on one morning when we had time, and I said, hey, bedtime's not working. It's really wearing me out. Like, it's really wearing mom out. Do you guys like books? Do you like reading books? Yeah. My kids were like, yeah, they loved reading books at bedtime. Well, here's what I noticed. We're spending so much time. I noticed you're not listening to mom, and we're not getting our PJs on and getting our teeth brushed and doing all those things. And we're not having time to read. How does that make you feel when we miss reading? So you have to connect something that the child likes, a motivator, to help motivate them to make the right behavior choice intrinsically. So let them know that they're going to get your time and attention in a real positive way if this, and this happens. So what we did, because we wanted bedtime to be a smoother process, I got 2 giant sheets of poster board, punched 2 holes in it, put 3M hooks on the back of their doors, because whether I was putting them to bed, their dad was putting them to bed, grandparents were putting them to bed, or a babysitter, I wanted the routine to be consistent, because the more consistent when they're young, the better it is. And even for certain kids, some kids require more consistency than others. My son would be one of those. He thrives on consistency and what to expect. So we went through their bedtime routine. It was like, okay, what are all the things we need to do before we go to bed or before we read a book? And we listed all the things, brush our teeth, go to potty, put our PJs on, get our clothes out for tomorrow. So all of those things, right? And then read books. And read books is the thing they want to do at the end, because it's positive interaction with people they love. And then they love choosing the books, right? So we need time to choose the books. So anyway, visual timers are really good for little kids. So I'd say, okay, if we can get all of these things done, so on the poster board, we did their bedtime routine. I let them choose. When you give kids choice, it builds their confidence, And it gives them a little bit of power because we're telling them where to be, what to do all throughout the day, right? So when there are opportunities for us to give them choices, that's helpful because it builds their confidence to make a choice, and it makes them feel like they have a little power, a little skin in the game, so to speak. So I said, do you want to brush your teeth first, or do you want to get in the bath first or brush your teeth first? Do you want to put your PJs on or pick out your book first? So you can give them two positive choices to create the chart. So I had the kids draw pictures. I wrote out what the routine was. Those charts were on the back of their doors for probably 5 or 6 years. Eventually it faded and we didn't need to use them or refer to them, but they were there. And eventually they came down. We didn't need them anymore because we became flexible and things changed. We didn't need that routine anymore, but we probably had to implement something else. There was probably a challenge somewhere else that we had to revisit, and we had to implement that. And with teenagers, they need rides. They need money to go places. If my son wants a car, and I'm like, if you want a car, that's a big responsibility. I want that for you. Tell him, I want that for you. I want to read you the books. I want to get you the car. But in order for you to be responsible with something that big, I need you to know you can show up consistently and be responsible with little things like getting up for school on your own, being on time, having your stuff together, packing your lunch ahead of time. Because what I'll notice is my son will often say, well, I'll just pack it in the morning. Well, he's not a morning person. That's not setting him up for success. So we talk about that because that's an adult issue too. That is a real life skill that he's going to need down the road. My mornings go better when I get my coffee maker set and I know that coffee is going to be ready when I get up. That's no different than him packing his lunch the night before, because he has a hard time getting up. So he doesn't have extra time in the morning. So the more he can do up front and prepare, the less stressed his morning will feel. Because I'll ask him, do you like being rushed? Do you like it when I'm kind of on you as far as how fast you're moving in the morning? Well, what could you do to make that better? And then he talks about it. Is it perfect? No, but we consistently talk about it. And the key is consistency over time. Not perfection, but consistency over time. But when our kids don't do those things, it's not about us. I'll have friends often say, well, I do everything for them and they just don't listen and they're not respectful. I'm like, it's not personal. It's not about you. It's just where they're at. And teenagers are, again, they're egocentric. Their biggest concern is getting to the party or buying the shirt or the shoes or whatever everyone has. Their biggest concern isn't the same as your biggest concern. And we can't expect them to have the same perspective. So we have to meet kids where they're at. Just like a toddler's biggest concern is getting that block or that truck that other kid has. That's their biggest concern. They want immediate gratification. And we see that need for immediate gratification now more than ever. And we see that because of phones and internet, kids and Alexa, because kids can get so much information so quickly. I mean, they have no idea how good they have it, right? But they don't have context for it. It's not their fault they were born in 2010, 2012, 2008, whenever they were born. It's not their fault that they don't have that context. That's just the context they have. They don't know what it's like, and I'll age myself here. You don't want your parents to hear your phone ring. We couldn't turn ringers off back in the day when we had home phones, and we had to call the weather channel. So when we got the call, the house phone wouldn't ring because we could just click over on call waiting. I mean, we had to be resourceful. They have no idea. I mean, now they can just message and text. It's just totally different. So you've got to really be flexible. You've got to learn to pivot. And again, modeling flexibility. I have one kid that's very flexible. I have one that's not. So it's just talking about how, yes, this didn't turn out the way you want. You're not there as early as you wanted, but sometimes we have to be flexible and we're doing the best we can. And the 4 Agreements, I talk about that book all the time, is one of my favorite books. And one of the agreements is what we were talking about initially, is not taking things personal. In the book, he says, don't take anything personal. And one of the other agreements is all you can do is your best. We don't want to give up better for perfect. There is no perfect. There's no perfect. I don't care how much you know, how good you are. There is not ever going to be a perfect parent. And there's never going to be a perfect child. So all we can do is our best. And one of the ways we can be our best is not taking responsibility for someone else's behavior. So seeing the behavior for what it is. And that is exactly, we need to be conscious in the present moment. And that is exactly how Conscious Not Crazy came to be. Because if you're conscious, you are living in the present moment. So things shouldn't make you crazy. We want you to be conscious in the present moment and deal with things as they are, not get in our heads with the past and not worrying about the future, just seeing it for what it is in the present moment. So we need to be conscious and not crazy. And that is literally how Conscious Not Crazy came to be. So not taking things personal, you got to start with yourself. Other people's behavior is not a result of something you do. That is their choice. And we've got to model that for them repeatedly because our actions speak louder than our words. No different than me telling my child they're on their device too much. And then at night, I sit down on mine. My actions are not matching my words. And again, I'm not perfect at it. I'm on my device too much sometimes. And I do tell them, I'm like, I do work on my device, which is true. So sometimes I'll tell them like, hey, I'm working. I'm not just aimlessly scrolling. But have I ever aimlessly scrolled? Absolutely. So again, not perfect. So yes, but too often we live in this world now where everybody wants to blame and be the victim, and I can't stand it. Blame. And when people play the victim, that's a real trigger for me. So because there's no accountability. It's like, no, you're upset. That's okay. It's okay to be mad, but it's also your job to fix whatever's going on in here to make yourself feel better. What do you need? And that's what there's all this depression and anxiety. And kids are just given this hall pass nowadays to be like, well, I'm just depressed. I'm just sad. Well, no, that's a choice. I'm not saying there aren't situations where people need medication. I'm not a doctor, not claiming to be, where people truly need medication for some of those things. But I do think because, again, of social media and all of these social media platforms and all the information they're fed on all these topics, that it has become somewhat of an excuse too. In addition to, it is a real thing, but it's also an overused, in my opinion, it's overused. We all have stressful, difficult moments. We can recognize that and then think about what we need. Do I need to just go out and take a walk in the sunshine? Do I need to go meditate and put on some meditation music? Do I need to just take some deep breaths? Do I need to go play with my dog? Do I need to take a nap? So teaching our kids maybe some of the tools we use and strategies we use to decompress when we're having those difficult moments. Or do I need to do something constructive? Maybe you like, or maybe you want to go read. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Maybe you go work out, but teaching your kids some of your coping mechanisms and skills, because that shows you have control and you have power for how you feel. You are not a victim. Someone else is not in charge of how you feel. Because you often hear parents say, well, you're just driving me crazy. You're just pushing my buttons. You're just making me mad. And my kids will be like, well, you're so mean. No, you don't you're probably feeling that way. You're feeling frustrated because you don't like the consequence. You don't like what I just told you. It doesn't feel good to be held accountable. Yeah, it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good when I'm held accountable. It doesn't feel good when I make a mistake, but it's okay. Whose responsibility was it to get the homework done? Whose responsibility was it to get the lunch? Stop saving your kids. Saving our kids is not helping them. I can 100% assure you, the more you save your kids, the more they will expect to be saved. And they will be lacking skills and tools that they need later in life. So saving your kids is not serving your kids. So if you want to serve your kids, stop saving them. I'm going to read you a quote. I pulled up a couple quotes before I started this podcast that I thought were really good. And I want you to think about these. And yes, I have to put my glasses on so I can see these quotes. But I love quotes. If you follow me on social media, which any of you guys can, I have my Conscious Not Crazy by Kori page on both, or CNC by Kori on Instagram and Conscious Not Crazy by Kori on Facebook. And then I have my personal page, but I love quotes. But listen to this. The unhappiest people are often those who care the most about what everyone else thinks. There is great freedom in leaving others to their opinion. And there is a huge weight lifted when you take nothing personally. So think about that. And I would agree to that. The unhappiest people I know worry all the time about what other people think. And you don't want to be a parent that instills that in a child, because you will raise a people pleaser. And that is not a healthy way to live, because it is not your job to please everybody else. And what'll happen is you won't be your true self, or your child won't be their true self, because they're too busy trying to figure out what everyone else needs. And that's not an attainable thing. And it's a miserable way to live. So we don't want to raise a bunch of people pleasers. And here's the other quote that I found. Stop taking things personally. When you realize how many people cope by projecting, you'll realize that you're not actually the problem. Again, people, when they, and I'm sure you've heard of the term gaslighting, but it's just projecting what they're feeling. They might be saying, I don't trust you. Well, they don't trust themselves. So stop questioning yourself. It's not about you. Step back, detach from what feels like an attacking statement, and see it for what it is. Like, wow, you must be feeling really frustrated. How can I be helpful? You must be feeling really scared. We do need to validate emotions. We don't want to suppress emotions, because with that comes a whole nother unhealthy set of coping mechanisms. So validate the emotion, but let's model healthy coping skills and stop taking it personal. And it's okay for your kids to get mad at you. You're not their friend, you're their parent. And consequences are good. Boundaries are good. Boundaries make kids feel safe. Kids like boundaries, whether they tell you that or not, because it makes them feel safe and it makes them feel loved. So establish healthy boundaries. If there's something that is consistently, as we might say, driving you crazy, stop and think, what can we do to fix it? Quit focusing on the problem and think of a solution. Think of a boundary. Think of a motivator. How do I get my kid to most likely choose and stop taking their behavior personal? Them leaving their dirty clothes out, them not putting their dishes in the sink, them not listening when you say it's time to go, them not wanting to stop playing with a friend or playing at the park. That is not them being mean to you. They are not motivated to do what it is you want them to do. So it's your job as a parent to find the motivator. And you do have power. And when you don't do that, and you just yell at your kids, or you get frustrated at them and you let them make you mad, you have just given all your power away. So stop giving your power away and start acting like the adult, and stop taking it personal. All right, guys. And I don't say that to judge you. I did it. I'm not saying it because, again, I'm not perfect. I don't do it perfect every day. I do the best I can. Just like in the 4 agreements, all you can do is your best. That's one of those agreements. All you can do is your best. So I'm not judging you. I'm just saying there is a better, more freeing way. And this way will help you in every aspect of your life, not just with your kids. So thanks so much for tuning in. I will post the 4 agreements in the notes on the podcast. And if you're liking the content, please continue to follow. There'll be another episode coming up soon. And I have some guests coming that I'm super excited about. And thanks so much. Take care. Enjoy this beautiful spring weather.